Hello everyone. Today's video is part 2 of the low-dose allergen therapy Q&A. If you didn't watch part 1 and you're interested in this topic, please check that video out. It's one I posted just before this one, so it should be pretty easy to find. And in there I give a little background on like what the heck is low-dose allergen therapy and talk about answers to question number 1. There's a couple other questions that this person submitted, so I'll get into those now. As per usual, nothing I'm saying should be construed as medical advice. This is for informational purposes only. If you need medical advice, please talk to your healthcare provider to obtain that advice. So the next question that was asked is, if a certain potency of LDA provokes symptoms, does that mean that the right dose is highly likely to make those symptoms better? Example might be a person's taking, say environmental mix, which would have lots of, as I mentioned in the first video, lots of different environmental allergens in there, like dust and pet dander and yeast and mold and different things like that. So say that person took, let's say that person took a 6C dosage, which would generally speaking be kind of the maximum strength dosage for an LDA or LDI formula. Sometimes we go a bit higher with LDA, maybe up to a 5.5 or a 5C. But if somebody took that 6C dosage and they had a flare-up, so it made, say, their allergy symptoms worse, then we would generally say, okay, that dose is too high. We got to walk the dose down, and so maybe we try like a 7C or an 8C or a 9C. With low-dose allergen therapy, the bigger the number, the more dilute it is. So the number refers to the dilution that's being used. So bigger number, it's a weaker formula. A little counterintuitive, but I didn't make up the naming system or the nomenclature, so don't shoot the messenger. So if that person then, say, took an 8C or a 9C, so like a dosage that's quite a lot weaker than a 6C, and they were tolerating that well, that would be a good indicator that we're probably barking up the right tree with this formula. That if, let's say, the 8C is well tolerated, maybe we try a 7C. If the 7C is well tolerated, then maybe we would try kind of a higher than average 7C dosage. So instead of, say, using what would generally be 4 units, which would be equivalent to about 1 drop of solution, depending on what kind of measuring instruments being used, then we might, instead of, say, going all the way up to 6E, as the 6E caused a problem, say 1 or 2 drops would be about equivalent to about 8 units. But 7C was totally fine with, say, 1 or 2 drops. Well, we probably want to increase the 7C, maybe try test drive the equivalent of say like 3 or 4 or 5 drops, or maybe even 10 drops, and see how that goes. And if that's well tolerated, then we're starting to think, well, maybe the 6C is going to be okay after all. Maybe we want to start with a lower dose. If the person had flared originally from, say, 2 drops of 6C, then maybe they would just try 1 drop of 6C. Depending on how badly they flared and what was going on, we might even try like 15 or 20 drops of 7C, and that would be equivalent to maybe like up to 60 units or 80 units or so of the formula. So again, units, drops, it just depends on what we're using. To answer the question, it is highly likely that there would be a therapeutic response to a formula if the full dose or a higher dose causes a flare-up, and then the lower dose doesn't cause any flare-up at all. The reason I make that distinction is that just on paper, kind of just at face value, it's like, yeah, if there's a flare-up from an LDA, then that means that there's too much antigen getting into the mix. There's kind of just too high of a concentration of allergens in there. It's actually provoking an immune system response, an inflammatory allergic response, and so we just need a lower dose. It's just like if you were going for allergy shots, the allergist kind of overshoots the mark and injects a dosage of, say, dust for your dust allergies that's higher than what your immune system can tolerate. It's like, oh, there's too much dust, even though it's a really dilute dust formula in the first place. There's a big welt or hive that forms on the person's arm, and then just, okay, we overshot the mark, we need to go to a lower dose. So it is a good prognostic indicator. However, I have had patients over the years, and actually just chatting about a patient with one of my residents, one of her patients, and so this patient, tried the 6C of whatever the formula was. I think it was environmental mix, and had a flare-up, and then tried an 8 or a 9C, had a flare-up, had a 15C. Now we're getting like super dilute. Like we're starting to get into like, is this kind of just like a homeopathic kind of formula here at this point? It's so dilute, and had a flare-up from that, and all the flare-ups were pretty comparable to one another. And so that's a big suspicion, or a cause for suspicion, that we're probably not dealing with an actual, we're virtually, there's always room for possibilities, I suppose, but it's like 99.99999% likely that we're not dealing with a traditional LDA flare-up in that case. This is a case where it's likely the person's nervous system is very hypersensitized to reacting to things, and that it's actually not a genuine hypersensitivity reaction to the formula, but rather it's something going on more with like a nervous system overreacting to sort of this given substance in question. So that's maybe a topic for another video getting into that, but okay, kind of getting more into the specifics of that. But if that type of pattern's happening where it's like, oh, 6C made me feel bad, 8C made me feel bad, and like pretty much comparably as bad, even though the dose is literally 10,000 times weaker with an 8C compared to a 6C, then we try like, a 10C or a 12C, oh, that made me feel bad too, and it's just about as bad as those, higher dosages, then that's where it's like, this is maybe not the best prognostic indicator that LDA is going to help. It still might help, but it's an indicator that we probably need to look at what's going on with the person's nervous system. Why is it kind of overreacting to things in a really disproportionate way? So again, a little bit of a broader topic than I'll get into here, but if anybody's interested, I'm happy to post about that topic for a future video. So anyway, short answer is yes, there's a good probability that LDA will help at a higher dose if it causes, or will help if a higher dose causes a flare-up. It just means we have to lower the dose, walk it up slower, but then when we find the sweet spot, then it's quite a high level of likelihood it will help. Let's see here, the last question. It's a good question, and I think that it warrants its own video because I'm already getting up to the 6.5 minute mark here, and I should probably leave it there. So I will have a part 3 of this coming up soon, so I hope that this is of interest. I hope the person asking the question is benefiting from the answers here. Yeah, I'll post that video and answer to the last question as soon as I can. If anybody has any questions or comments about LDA, any questions, feel free to fire away. Any comments like, hey, I tried low-dose allergen therapy and it really helped with this, or it flared this up, or whatever it happens to be, or I use this other immunotherapy that helped, post in the comment section. I like to learn from the comments. Other folks read the comments, so it's nice to have a little bit of a discussion about things if you have something that you're comfortable and willing to share. Otherwise, I will leave it there for now and post the next video ASAP.